I'm going to go through the metadata menu plugin, and I highly recommend you have a look in the description for the chapters because this is going to be a long one. First up, you'll want to have Dataview the community plugin installed, and then go ahead and install the metadata menu community plugin. Inside of the Dataview community plugin settings, we're going to enable the JavaScript queries and enable the JavaScript inline queries. And now we get to metadata menu. I will go through these, like I say, go through the chapters individually, but going through the settings, we have global settings. At a quick glance, you'll want to change the first day of the week to either Sunday or Monday. For me, it is Monday, so I'm okay with that, and these others we'll go through later on. The preset field settings are what we will start with. So looking into the file class settings, there are three options in here: a folder, a class alias, and a global class file. Again, we'll go through it in that section of the video. The metadata menu button gives you the option to change the button icon, and the icon shows in any of these views, which you can either toggle on or toggle off: the reading mode, live preview, tab header, backlinks, search, File Explorer, and starred. And the starred is actually the bookmarks plugin because that was a recent addition to Obsidian Core. But to know what icon you want to put in here, you actually need to find a list of what all of the icons are. I'm going to create a new file and then open up the command palette either from the ribbon by clicking on Open Up Command Palette or using the hotkey Control-P. And underneath the button settings, we have the query, and this is where Dataview Query knowledge can come in handy. I'm not going to go into Dataview in this video, but the more you know, the easier it will be to customize some of the functions for metadata menu. So looking at the preset field options, I'm going to add a new field, and this brings up what's called a field modal. Basically the interface you will become very familiar with. I'm going to call the field status. I'm not going to do anything with the command at the moment. The field type I'm just going to leave to accept any value, and I'm not going to add a template in. So save. Now I have a status field option. So going to the file, there is no option here. If I go to the top of the tab and right click, I now have lots of options down the bottom. There is the add field at section, and this gives us three different places to add the field status that we've just added. So I could add this field as a list item, as a comment, or I can add it in the front matter. So I've selected front matter, and now it's saying, do I want to add a new field or add the field that I've just added in the preset settings? I click into status, it then says, okay, what do you want to add next to status? I'm going to type to do, click on save, and now inside of the front matter, in between these three dashed lines, it's added the status field with the to do section. Going into the global settings, we have this toggle, the display field options in context menu. So if I turn this off, then go back and right click on the tab and scroll down, you can see I don't have all of the options that have appeared. I only have field options. Then when I click on field options, it gives me that pop-up. So that's a customization you can have inside of the context menu. And you'll notice we have update status. So because we've added the status field, it now gives me the option to update the status. So I click in, I can then change it to working, save, and now it's changed the information inside of the file to working. If I turn this back on, we then have the update status, add field section, add field at cursor, and add field in list front matter. All of those options have appeared in the context menu again. And now we're going to add a new field, call it priority. And inside of the template of any value, I'm going to say this is, and then inside curly brackets, type name. Save. Now when I right click and add field in front matter, I can select priority. And it's given me a pop-up saying name because it wants me to add a value for the name. I'm going to type in hi, and it's going to show this is hi, and then I'm going to push on save, and now inside of priority, this is hi because I've added in that name to the template. So I could go back to the preset field settings, come into the priority and say, okay, I'm going to edit this, and I want it to say priority at the end, and I'm going to change the name to priority and then save it. Right click on the tab, go down to manage fields, and then update either status or priority, in this case priority. And now the pop-up name, instead of it saying name, says priority. I can still add the value, so hi, and now it says this is high priority. Save. And now inside of the priority field, it says this is high priority. Going back to the global settings, I can ignore certain fields. So I've added in the status field as something to be ignored. Now when I right click, go down to update, you can see it's only letting me update the priority field because the status field is being ignored. I can then add a comma, priority, and now the status and priority fields are both being ignored in the context menu. And now I right click and you see there's no options in the context menu. An alternative way to access the context menu is the three dots on the far right of any file. And you see we've got the exact same options down there. or you can right click on the file in the Files core plugin and you'll get the menu inside of there as well. Again, all of them will have the same settings from the global settings. So I'm going to remove those from the ignored field. And now when I go to the options, you can see we can manage fields and I can manage both of these. So let's go to the status and I can change this to done, push the tick, and now it's completed. At the moment, the status is completely manual, but if I go to edit and then inside of the template, we add some text. So 2 curly brackets, status, colon, an open square bracket, then inside of speech marks a first option, so to do, comma, working, done, close it out with a square bracket, and then close out the curly brackets. And for customization of this template, I'm going to say the status is, and then it will give me a list, so save. If I come into manage the status field, it will say status, and it gives me a drop down of to do, working, done, so I can click on working, and the preview results says the status is working, click, and it's added that to the field. Maybe you don't need a template, so we can delete this one and we can add a new field. Still call it status, but instead of accepting any value and adding a template in, we can add a single select list. We're going to pick the values from this setting, so add a value, to do, working, and done, and then we can tick it. You can see we've got a select field type and an input field type. We have the status currently as the input template that we just used. If we go to the context menu and manage the fields to update the status, it gives us a drop down. We can search through, but we don't need to. We've only got 3 options here. So say working, and it's changed the status to working. Now, when I'm inside the file, if I get rid of that working, you can see there's actually an autocomplete option that pops up to do, working, and done. They're the options we added to the status. So I can click to do, and it adds it in. By going to the global settings, we can actually turn this off if we don't want to see it. So now when I get rid of to do, there's no autocomplete. I personally keep this on because I don't see why you wouldn't. So now next to status, we can say we're working. And let's add a new field and call this one topic. And now, instead of having a single select, we want a multi-select, so multi-value from list. We're again going to add the values inside of the settings, so add value. So we've got cognition, learning, pedagogy, andragogy. You can add as many as you want, so we're going to save it. Now we've got an input, a select, and a multi-type field. Right-click, manage field, and now you can see there's only 2 fields in here, so we need to add the field. I have my cursor underneath the front matter, so now if I was to add field at cursor, then select the topic, you can see the icon changes depending on the type of field it is, so topic. I then want to select learning and pedagogy. Pedagogy is essentially learning for children, andragogy is for adults, so we're going to save it. And I'm going to zoom in so you can see, and we've got 2 colons next to topic, and this is Dataview specific. That's not Obsidian, it's Dataview specific, that community plugin. This one right here. And this is what we call inline metadata. So it's still information for the file, it's just after 2 colons of the field. If I go down and add field in front matter, I can add the topic in the front matter. So let's go learning and pedagogy again. And you can see it didn't actually do anything because it already knows there's stuff inside the file. So if I remove it, now add the field to front matter, it's added it in the front matter inside of these square brackets. And that's because inside of the general settings, we have front matter list display. If we change this to indented list, go back and add the field again, you can see it's changed the view to topic and then learning pedagogy as a list rather than an array. I personally like to keep everything on the same line, so I'm going to leave it as array. I'm then going to update the topic. I can just tick them on, tick them off, and then when I save, it's now saved them in that array format. But when we look at the preset fields, all of these fields are set to every single file in the vault. So if I rename this project 1, say this is a project that's got a status, priority, and this is the topic, add a new file as project 2, so we can see those side by side. We've got project 1 and project 2. Inside of this file, right click, we have the exact same options. So add missing fields at section will add all of the fields, and let's add them in the front matter, and it's added all the fields which are missing, and these are all the preset fields. Going next to status, we get the autocomplete, so say we're to do, and everything else still works exactly the same. But what if we have a specific class of file? For example, if I have a source file, so a source note, a video, a podcast, something I've consumed, and I don't want all of the project information inside of the source because I don't need to know what topic the source is from, it's just a source, I just need a link. Well, I don't need all of these fields. And that is where instead of using a preset field, we use a file class. Going into the settings, we need a path for the file, and we can have multiple classes, which means we need a folder, and then we can have an alias for the class field. So I'm going to make a folder, call it class, right click, new note, call it project. So now I have a project file in the class folder. Inside of the settings, I'm going to add the folder, the class folder in. And at the moment, we're just going to leave the FileClass field alias as FileClass. Now if I add FileClass as a field inside of the project1 file, I can then add project because that is a class inside the class folder. And you'll notice now there is the clipboard icon on side of the project1 as well. If I take this off, you can see the icon disappears and it's only on the project class. And then when I add it in, the icon reappears because the project1 is part of the project class. If we change this alias to just class, you can see the icon's disappeared because it's looking for class, not file class. So I remove the file, click out, and it will update the file. And you can see the icon has now appeared because it's looking for class and project, which is actually a class inside the folder. But now I want all three of these fields to be specific to the project class, and that's where I'm going to click onto the icon on the file, and this brings me up the class window. So I get three different tabs inside of the class window, and this is for the project class specifically. I'll go through the table view later on, but going to the file class fields at the moment, it's empty. And when you push the plus, we come back to this field window, this field modal, which we can add all those fields in. We want status, single value, to do, working, done, save it. We also want the priority, single value, high, medium, and low, save. But I don't actually want the topic because I'm not interested in the topic for the project, my personal preference. So now if I go over and click on the icon to project one, it brings up the class modal or the class setting options. We have the class down the bottom, so we have the project class and the fields, the two fields, status and priority. Going to the right, I can click on the icon and it lets me update the information. So to do, working, done, let's say it's to do, and you can see in the background, status is now changed to do. At the moment, the priority is this is high priority because that's the template we had from the preset fields. I'm going to go into the menu, click on low, and now it's changed it to low priority. And the topic isn't appearing because it's not inside of the project class. However, if I right click, go down to manage fields, you can see it's still a field. The topic is still a field that I can update. I can manually update it if I want. So the preset field stays there, but it's not going to appear in the class editing options. So let's delete it because we don't want it. If we then take a look at project 2, we've got priority, status, and topic. We don't want the topic in there, but there's no icon, and there's no icon because there's no class identifier. And this is where I'm going to go to the FileClass Settings, and you can see I can map with tags. So if I turn this on and save, I can then add a tag to this file, and it will grab the class settings from the project. So by typing #project, I've added the tag. You can see it's appeared in the tag pane. There's one tag, project, and project, the word matches the file name. You can see file name project, and this is the class settings. So now we've got the icon, we can then select whatever we want. Status is to do, priority is high, and again, topic isn't appearing because it's not in the class. So I can delete the line, but as you can see, I don't have that class identifier. If we compare the two projects, we've got project 1 and project 2. Project 2 is using the tag, project 1 is using the class identifier. And they both do the same thing because the class is mapped with tag. But what if I want to have a status for the source and not a priority? Right click, new note inside of the class. I'm going to call it all and then open up the class window. Go into the FileClass fields, add a field, single select, to do, working, done, save. But now when I go to the FileClass settings, I can set a global file class. And when I go to search, I can select either of the files inside the folder, the class folder. So we're going to click on all. And you can see now the source file doesn't have a tag, it doesn't have a class, but it has an icon because the all class has been attached to all of the files. So the status is available. I'm going to add it in. Let's say it's to do. So the status is now to do, and it's part of the all class. Going into project 2, going into the icons, it's still only showing one status because the name of the field is exactly the same. Inside the project status field, I'm going to change working to WIP, i.e. working in progress, save it. Now when I go to project 2, go to status, you can see project 2 is still using the status from the project class, not the all class. Work in progress. So to summarize this, we've got the all class, which goes on every single file, source 1, project 2, and then we have the project class, which goes on project 1 and project 2. The class is identified by either class inside of the front matter or a tag that's mapped inside of the class settings, or you can have a global class that's added inside of the metadata menu settings option. If you remember, we have that metadata menu button, and that's currently the clipboard list. If I open up the project file, click on the icon, you can see inside of the FileClass Settings there is a button icon option. At the moment it's showing the clipboard list. If I change the word, so check, it's now going to show a check mark next to all the projects. Save, and you see the icons next to project has now changed into a check mark. So I'm going to add in file check, and now it's got a file with a tick inside of it. That's the icon I want. Save. The Commander Community plugin is one I use aside, and when you go to add a command, so save file, it then comes up with another search option, and these words are actually the words that the metadata menu finds, so I actually find this more useful. Let's say album, and there's the icon. While we're here, you can see inside the project file you have the settings inside of the front matter. So everything inside of the FileClass Settings, max page, etc., this is all shown inside of the front matter of the file, and then the FileClass fields are actually inside the file itself. You can see there's the status, and that's the information. If you want to, you can change this manually inside the file, but I personally would recommend using this or one of the other options shown later on in the video. So now that we have the button icon up here, I don't really need all of these options down inside the context menu. So go to the global settings, I'm going to turn this one off, go to the preset fields and delete all of these because I don't need the preset fields because I have two different classes, one class for all of the files and classes specific to the files that I've added a class to. If I remove all the information from project 1, you can see there's no project class to it because the icon's changed, but there is the all class. And what I want to do is I want to change this status because I want all the files to have an option to add a class in. So if I click on the settings cog, it lets me change the information of this field. I'm going to call it class, and then inside of this list, I'm going to add project, then save it. And now I can click on this button because it inserts all missing fields, insert it to the front matter, and if I could spell right, it would show project. Right, project. So now when I add project in, you can see the icons change because it's added in the project class. And this is a way to add a class every single time because the all class, the global class, the one in here basically says, hey, do you want to add a class to this? So we open up the all class file, go into the all class settings, go into the file class fields, you can see that information has been changed through the settings we've just gone through. Now that the class has been added to project, we can click on the icon and now we get the status and the priorities from the project class. I can insert the missing fields here, or I can insert the missing fields here. So if I click on this button, it inserts all the fields. Again, we want to go front matter, and it adds all of the fields from the project class specifically into the front matter. But what if I have specific types of projects? Well, I've got project class and there's a plus button. So I push the plus button and it gives me the option, you can see, to create a field name. I'm going to add type. We're going to keep this simple for the moment and have a single drop-down list, video, blog, podcast, save, and now it's added a field to the project class, and you can see it's appearing here. I can insert the missing fields. Again, go to front matter, and now it's added in the type field inside the front matter. I push space, autocomplete, let's say it's blog, priority is medium, and status is to do. So I can add a field to a class from this menu. But when I have a look at the file class settings, we've got the max record, which is how many files are shown inside of the table view. Again, I'll go through that later. But then we have this tag names option. At the moment, we have one project tag. But what if I added a blog tag to project 1, and then inside of the tag names, add hashtag blog? Now if I remove that class project, so it's no longer in the project class, you can see the icon is now changed back to that clipboard icon rather than the file check icon because there's no class, no blog tag. But if I add the blog tag, it changes the icon because now it's part of the class. However, if I add tag names, the map with tag is overwritten. And now when I look at project 2, even though it's got the project tag and it is mapped, it's not going into the tag name. So I need to add the project tag back in. So project, and now the icon's changed. If we change this one to video, remove the project tag and then add the video tag, we've got blog tag, video tag, and both of them are projects. So they're in the project class. Now going to the file class fields, you can see type. If I edit, change it to tag, save, you can see the tag inside the front matter is being read, and because it's a video and the video tag is being mapped to the project class, it's being identified, and you can see we've got all of the other information in there with the correct icon. So to clarify, you could use the tag from inside the file, so inline tags or front matter tags to identify whether it's in the class or not. Then by removing those tag names, the icons are going to disappear because video is no longer mapped to the project and blog is no longer mapped to project. And now we need the project tag or the project class being added back in. Going over to the class folder, I'm going to add 2 more classes. We now have a video class and a blog class with the project class. I'm going to add a field inside of the video class called workflow. Still keeping it simple, we're going to use a single value list. And we've got the workflow in here: research, script, record, edit, publish, thumbnail. Now actually I'm going to do the thumbnail before the publish, so I can push this up button and it changes the order. So in the drop down, this is the order it's going to show. We're going to save it. Going down to the blog, we're going to do the same thing. In this one we have research, draft, write, edit, publish, save. So we have project 1 with a blog class. You can see the icon is a pen, and project 2 is a video class where the icon is a video. But when I click on the icon, it's only showing the workflow, so I can insert missing fields. But if I go to the video class settings, you can see parent file class. And if I add a parent file class, I can select project. And now when I go to the project 2 and I click on the icon, I have workflow, which comes from the video class, and status, priority, and tag from the project class. You can see the highlights is showing which class each field is related to. And now you can see the difference between the insert missing fields here. This button will add both fields from the 2 different classes, whereas this button will add the field from the project class, i.e. the tag, and this button will add the field workflow from the video. I want both of them, so I'm going to click this button. Again, add it front matter. Go to the workflow, let's say I'm scripting this video, and everything else is as you would expect. Going into the blog settings, you can see I haven't mapped with tag because at the moment it's going to the class, so that setting isn't needed. I've got the button icon, which is a pen tool. Tag names, I don't need any. Parent file class, add, let's go project. So now when I click on the pen tool, I get the workflow and I get the tag, so let's add those into front matter. And now in the workflow, it's showing the blog workflow. So let's say I'm drafting this one. So project 1 has 2 classes. It's got a blog class and a project class, and project 2 is a video, so it's a video class and a project class because the video and the blog both have a parent file class of project. You can notice I no longer need the tag, so I can go in and click on either of the icons and there's the tag, but I don't need this anymore. So I can go into the settings and down the bottom it says delete, so I can delete it. Do you really want to remove this attribute from project? Yes. And now I've deleted the tag field from the project class. So if I go over to the blog, you can see the tag field has also been removed there because the project class is the same. It's still going to show inside the file, but I can't edit it or do anything with it because it no longer exists in metadata menu, so I'll delete the line in both files. Now for a blog, I do it every single day, so I don't actually need the priority because I do the blog every single day. I don't need to say, let's do this one first, so I don't need this property, which means I can go to the blog file class settings, go to excluded fields, add one, and I can pick from status or priority, and obviously I don't want the priority, so I can click on that one. And now when I click on the pen icon, that field doesn't appear because I don't need it. Again, I can delete the line from the file, and I can't add in because it's been excluded from the blog. But if I go into project 2, the video project, priority is still there because it's still inside of the video class. You can see there's nothing excluded. Now what's happening with the source? Well, the source is going to have lots of different fields in. So I'm going to create a new class, new file in the class folder, call it source, click on the icon to open up the class window, file class fields, add field. I want a notes field that I can type anything in. I want a status field that is single select, but instead of it being defined in the settings, I'm going to change this and say from a note. And it's now looking for a path for the note. So I'm going to save. So now we've got source status. I'm going to say clipped, processing, go back in, edit the field. And now inside of the path, I'm going to search for source status, save. So now when I go to source 1, go to the options, you can see we've got the class option. Going into source 1, adding class, source is going to change the icon. So we've now got notes, status, insert missing fields, insert them into the front matter, my preference. Now in the status, click on the options, and we've got clipped and processing. So processing is in there. If on a new line I add something else, let's say I'm reading something, but actually I want reading to be above clipped, I can move it. I'm going to go hotkeys, move line up, add control up arrow, down, move line down, plus control down arrow. So now when I click on reading, I can control up and it takes it up. So we're reading, clipped, processing. And now when I go to source one, click on the menu, we got status, come in and we got reading, clipped, processing. So reading, and now we're reading something. Going to add another field. This time we're going with a multi-value, so multi-select. Now, for those of you that know Dataview queries, you can do anything you want with Dataview.js inside of here, but for us simpletons, I'm going to save this, create a folder called subjects, and inside the folder add andragogy, cognition, learning, and pedagogy, and this is where I can write notes down or do whatever I want for those specific topics. I'm going to rename the folder so I don't get confused to topics. And trying to keep this real simple, thank you Davos for the help inside of the Discord, all I'm doing is I'm mapping the pages inside of the topic folder and looking for the file name. So it's going to give me a list, a multiple values list of everything inside of the topic folder. So save. Now the source one file with the source class, go into the icon, go to the topic field, multi-select, and now I can pick learning and pedagogy from the multi-select dropdown, and these are files inside of the folder, remember? So save. And now we've got learning and pedagogy. If I go in and say topic, new note, and say cognitive psychology is a topic I want to explore. Now when I go back to the source file and I go in, go to the topic, you can see cognitive psychology has appeared in that drop-down list. So cognitive psychology instead of learning, select, and there it is shown in the array. If I go to edit the field, you can see at the moment the front matter list display is plugin default, and that's the array that we set because it was either an array or a list, but I can change it here if I want for this specific field. But I'm going to keep it the same. Add field, I'm going to add a rating, and I'm going to cycle through values from a list. These three options still appear, but I'm going to keep it nice and simple, keep them in settings. Using Windows dot brings up the emoji menu. On Mac, I think it's Command Shift Space. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But add a star. So we've got 1 through 5 stars and save. Now we've got a cycle field, 1 through 5 stars. Let's insert the missing field in front matter. Now when I click on the cycle button, you can see it's empty at the moment in the background. Click on cycle, it adds the 1. Then 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and then click again, it goes back to 1, and it will cycle all the way through those numbers. Now I bring information in from Zotero, so I'm going to say add a boolean, so true or false option inside. So this is a field name Zotero, true or false, save. And now when I add this in, instead of adding the insert field, I'm just going to go over, click, and it gives me this option, so insert front matter. And now I can say true or false. Now this one wasn't from Zotero, so I can push tick. And this is showing false. If I was to get rid of the false and type true, you can see there's a little difference. So if I go into the icon now, it's changed to true, and you see we've got the X, and if I hover over, I can tick it to a tick. So that's the icon that changes. Using difficulty as an example, I'm going to use a number value this time. We've got an optional step. I'm going to add 5, minimum value, 0, and a maximum value, 100, and I'm going to save it. And now when I enter in a value, it gives me a value to enter, so let's say 10. And then the step shows -5 or +5, so I can add 5, goes to 15, -5 goes to 10, so save it. And inside of here we can see we can -5 or add 5, and then we can go in and manually change the number. We're going to add a link field for author. I'm going to look for pages in the author folder, so I've just added an author folder with myself and my podcast co-host Jonathan Stewart, so it's going to look for me or John, and then you can change the alias and sort order, again using JavaScript. I'm not going to go through it here because it gets complicated, so keeping it simple, we're going to go save. Now when I add this in, I don't want to add this into the front matter because the links don't work in front matter, which means I want to add it somewhere else. If I click on 10 and then click, let's say Danny, you can see it's added in inline front matter on line 10 because that's the line that was available. If I enter a load of lines down, you see the scroll bar is increasing as I go. I've now got more spaces, and then delete this line, go into the settings, add a link. You can see all these lines are now available, so I can add it to 14, I can add me, and now I am there, and it links me to that file. So if I middle click, it takes me to Danny Hatcher, which is in the author folder. The accept multi-links option is co-authors. Again, you can change the front matter, so an array, a listed view, or the default. I'm going to use the exact same query, Now if I click on the icon, again, co-writer, multi-file, go into the settings. I need to add it. I don't want it in the front matter, but if I come up here, you can see add this as a comment item, and then go in, let's say 13, Blair, Jonathan, save. It's added it as what's actually a quote block, not a comment, and we've got co-writers, again, inline, front matter, Blair and Jonathan both linked. Alternatively, I can go into the list, add it in, go in, add it as a list, then go, let's say 12, Blair and John, save, and now it's been added as a list item, so a bulleted list rather than a quote block. I'm going to add a date field and accept date. I can change the date format. This is the default date format, so I'm going to keep it the same. But if you go into the settings, go to the Daily Notes core plugin, which is default activated. You have a format reference in here, which shows you all the different options, which you can see there are plenty of to change all the different types of dates. And I'm going to keep it blank. Insert link by default will link to a file. I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to leave the link path empty, and the define a shift interval is very similar to the number. I'm going to say 2 days, field containing shift intervals. I'm going to leave empty for the moment, so save. I'm going to add the date field again inside of the actual file rather than the front matter because it's a link. And in here, I can go into a date picker. So let's say the 19th. If I push on the fast forward button, and then I'm going to save it, and it's inserted a link to a file of that date. And this will link directly to a daily note if that's a plugin you're using. So the Daily Notes core plugin can be used as a journal. I've done a video on that previously, which I'll link up somewhere up here. And you can see this will link directly to this file. Very useful if you journal. Now, if I come in and then push this shift button, I can shift it 2 days forwards, shift it 2 days forwards again. And when I go into the settings, that is this shift interval. And when we go into the icons, you can see we've got the date. If I click into here, we can then select the date. And because I have the natural language dates plugin, I can put natural language dates in. If I say in 3 days and save, it's taken today's date, which is the 21st, and added 3 days. If I go in again in 2 weeks and save, it's now going to add 2 weeks onto today, which is this, I assume. And for clarity, that is the natural language dates plugin. We've got some settings in here. All I've done is said, hey, Monday is the first day of the week. This is the date format, again, using the default date format, and all of the other information in here is for that specific plugin, but we're talking about metadata menu here. Now I've changed the class to tag, so the tag source and the source class maps to this, as I've explained before. And I've also created an author class, and the author class is also mapped to a tag. So I am an author because it says author, and we're going to add a field, and it's going to be a lookup query, and it's going to be called papers. I'm going to use the source tag because that's what all of these sources will have. It's tagged, which is mapped to the class. So I'm looking for all of the sources, looking at the author field inside of the sources, which you can see in the background at the moment. I am an author of source 1. And then I want a list of related links displayed in line. So let's tick this off. That's the lookup completed. Now inside of the Danny Hatcher author file, go in, add the field. We're going to make sure it's in line because it's going to be a link. And now I can refresh. And when I refresh or update the value, you can see it's brought in source 1. When I go into the settings, there is an auto update field option. So I can click that on. Now we save. And so source 1 has me as an author. But if I am not the author of source 1, then it's going to disappear from my author page. If, however, I am an author, so I bring myself back in, you can see it's auto-updating the papers. So this lookup is looking at all of the sources and looking at the author field and saying, okay, is Danny Hatcher the file linked inside of the author field? If it is, show that, so source 1. For a bit of clarity, I've just added a sources folder. So we've got source 1 as a folder, source status. So if I add a new source, we've got source 2. I can then add the source tag, go to the icon, click on the author, let's go into here, let's select Danny Hatcher. I am now an author of source 2 and I've appeared in the lookup inside the author file. I can change the type of output, so I'm going to show the links underneath the field, so let's save it, it will overwrite things. You can see by taking out the author, it's now showing it as a list. So papers, and then it's got lists linked below. So let's add my name back in. And now it's adding it in as a list underneath the papers inline field. There are custom functions, so you can custom list, so you can list them in different ways, adding in whatever you want. Same thing with the list below, so that can be inline or below and add custom viewing. And there is a built-in summarizing function. Now, if I go to the summarized field and say, let's say pages, and let's go to sum, it's going to add the number inside of pages. So select, let's say this source is 10 pages, and this source is 5 pages. It's now looking, okay, this has got me as an author. There's 10 pages in this. This has got me as an author. There's 5 pages in this. So it's adding it together to make 15. If we change it from sum to count and then save, you can see the number will change to 2 because this has got a number. This has got a number, which makes it 2. Count all, average, max, min, all normal maths stuff. Going back to source 1 and adding another field, if we go to the formula, there's again lots of other JavaScript options here, but we're going to keep it nice and simple and use the example. So we've got current.apple plus current.banana, so it's looking for the banana field and the apple field. At the moment we don't have them. So I've just added apple 5, banana 10. Now when I come up to the icon, add in the formula, let's add it in between papers and apples, then update. You can see it's gone 15. If we go into the settings and say auto update this field, tick it on, let's add a bit of a space. Let's change the apple to 7. I've now changed it to 7 and 10. So 7 plus 10 is obviously 17 and it will update. Now we've gone through some more fields. When we go to the all class, so this is the one that's added to every single file. If I go to edit this and change it to values returned from a Dataview query, and we say dv pages class, it's now looking for all of the files inside of the class, so we can tick that one on. So we have authors inside the author folder, class inside the class folder, projects inside the projects folder, sources in the sources folder, topics in topics folder. But if I add a new file, you can see we've still got the icon on because it's a new file and it's part of the all class. Then I can come in and say, okay, let's add it here. Which one is it? Well, it's not going to be all, so it could be project, blog, whatever. So let's say it's source, and now it adds all of those files in, giving us the option because it's brought it in. And just for clarification, you need to add the map bit at the end, and when you're looking for a folder, you need single speech marks and double speech marks. I'll leave the template in the description below so you can copy this out so you can see what's going on. Shifting gears a little bit, inside of here I'm going to open a canvas file, and you can create a canvas from the ribbon or from going to the command palette, typing in canvas and then create new canvas. I'm then going to drag and drop each of the authors into the canvas, zooming out, and now you can see all 3 of them in the canvas and all 3 of them at the side. Then by clicking on the icon, going into the field and adding in a field, I'm going to create a coworker field. And the coworker field is looking at the canvas links. You can see update with links in canvas. The path of the canvas is currently untitled. For the moment, I'm going to leave the direction to both sides, but it can be incoming or outgoing. And I'm going to save, which will then add that field. You can see coworkers has now been added to each of these authors because the canvas field is automatic. So if I come in and we add a link between Danny and Jonathan, and you can see because of the link, it's now got Danny as a coworker with John and Jonathan with a coworker with Danny, and Blair is completely empty. However, if I move this link, Danny and Blair are now co-workers. You can see co-worker Danny, co-worker Blair inside of these pages. So all of the links work as you would expect. The main issue I see here is at the moment it's in the front matter. So the links don't work. If you move it out of the front matter and update it, it then goes back in the front matter. Maybe that's a bug or something that I don't personally understand about this feature. But going back into the settings, you can be specific about matching colors, or the edges matching from sides, and even the labels inside of those links. So I'm now looking for a red link that goes from the top to the right and is labeled coworker. So you can see I now have a red link that's from the top of Danny to the right of Blair, and it says coworker, which is why there's now the coworkers in there. If, however, I was to go from the top of John to the right of Blair, this wouldn't work because it's not red. So I change it to red, and then I add a note saying coworker, and now Jonathan and Blair are coworkers. So Blair's got 2 coworkers, and John and Danny just have the 1. But then you can go even further and say, okay, node matching colors. So let's say yellow. And then you can add even more specificity with Dataview queries. We're going to leave that empty because, like I say, that can get very complicated. So it's got to be yellow. And now when we have a look inside the canvas, we've got a yellow node, which is me, going to Blair. So Blair has a co-worker, me, but I'm not in there because Blair is not yellow. If I change Blair to a yellow, it will now appear because Blair is yellow, so we've got all of those things in there. But because Jonathan isn't yellow, Blair doesn't see Jonathan as a co-worker, so I'd need to change this one to yellow as well. In a similar sense, we can update with groups in Canvas. I'm going to call this one University. This time it's matching colors of groups because you can't have like links of groups or anything like that. So we've got the colors, let's say green, and save. Right click on the canvas, create group, change the color to green, and you can see Blair and Danny both have a university in the UK, but Jonathan doesn't. Even if I add a group that says Germany, Jonathan's in the Germany group, but it's not green, so it doesn't go in. But let's add a blue color and a Germany label. Both of those need to match. So either green or blue, this is blue, and inside the Germany group. So Blair doesn't have a university, Danny doesn't have a university, because even though they're in a green group, it's not called Germany. But Jonathan's in a blue group called Germany. Now I've got a related university field that updates with links to groups in Canvas. So still the untitled canvas, I'm going to leave all the colors and all the links and all the sides and stuff empty, leaving all the groups, connected nodes, all of those empty. Now if I get the link from the UK group and then add that to John, so let's add it to the right side of John so you can see the difference. With John, you can see nothing's happened, but in the related university, Danny has Jonathan and Blair has Jonathan because it's they're a person in a related university. Now with a little bit of cleanup, this is one working example. What I actually use this sort of stuff for is fantasy writing, fantasy novel writing, which I'm not going to show you. But we've got cognitive psychology, ecological psychology, then we've got the UK, Germany and USA. They could be names of universities. And so inside of John, you can see co-workers. The lines are the co-workers. So we've got Danny and Blair are co-workers. The papers are 0. That's just the number field. We have university is cognitive psychology because they're cognitive psychology and from the US. So this is the group field. They're at a university in the USA, whereas Danny is doing ecological psychology in the UK and Blair is doing ecological psychology in Germany. But then related university, you can see there's nothing in Blair, there is nothing in Jonathan, but with Danny, there is related. You're like, what? And that's because Jonathan does some work at the UK university. What for? That could be for any reason. But you can see Danny could work with Jonathan because a related person. Maybe you'd rename this to related co-worker. I don't know. This is just a working example of how you could start to use the canvas in all of these fields. Now, when it comes to the class source file, when you open up the class view, you get this table view. And the table view, you can see, you can show results to however many pages you want. I have it set to 100, but it will show every single file that is in this class. So we've got source 1 and source 2. If I was to open up the video, you can see it's just showing the project 2 because that's the only video project that we've got. And each column of the table is a field. So inside of the source, we've got all of those fields. And for the field that isn't available, i.e. it's not in the file, so if I open up source 2, you can see we've got the author and we've got pages and source 2. If we go all the way across, we've got the author in there, and then we go all the way across. We won't actually see pages because pages is a field that's not inside of the source class. So if you come up to the icon and we have a look down, there's no pages. So this table view only shows what's inside of the class. And each of these plus buttons lets you add that field in. So let's push the plus there. I'm then going to add the field in, and let's just say processing. So you could use this as a view to edit all of the field inside of any of these classes. And then, in addition to that, if we come up to the top, you can see the 3 lines. If we open this, display filters, we can filter for any of these files. So if we're looking for a specific source, we can then search the file name, search the notes, search for status. So if we're looking for the status, reading view and refresh, you can see it's now looking for just the reading view. If we get rid of that, then push the refresh button, we now have all of the fields back and the files back. So this can be used as a database. Let's go to the rating, push plus, add the rating in, let's give it a 4-star. And now when I go to the rating, I can also add a sort. So I'm going to push the down button and now it's going from top to bottom. So now it's giving me the top rating 4 and then the bottom rating 1. And because this is a cycle, I can click the button and it will change it from 1 to 2. And this is a really nice way to see everything inside of a class, but not my personal preference. What I do is have a home canvas, so this is a canvas called home. I have a file called class queries. Then inside of that file, and what I'll do is add Dataview queries. I'll leave a link in the top right for other Dataview things, but this is a very basic one. There's a table, look from, and then we've got projects folder. So I'm not using the class or a tag, I'm using a folder. So it's going to look for project 1 and project 2, and when I come out, there's project 1 and project 2. If I push on the blog icon, you can see we've got workflow, status, and priority. They are the fields inside of the blog, and inside of the video, workflow, status, and priority. But if you remember, the workflow inside of the video is different from the workflow inside of the blog. But the Dataview query doesn't care. So I'm going to add status, priority, and workflow as titles. Now when I come out, it says there's the status, there's the priority, and there's the workflow. Now you can already do a lot with these simple queries, and just going through table, from, adding in where clauses, which are filters, and then sorts to sort them in maybe status order or priority order, and I've done that in the past. But what you can actually do is use Dataview.js. So what I've done is I've recreated this table from the default inside of Dataview.js. So I've got dv table, make a table. These are the columns: project, status, priority, and workflow. And the project is going to be this file column. And then I'm going to look for dv pages inside of the projects folder, because that's what we're looking for. And I'm going to map, i.e. look for, the file link as the first one. So I'm making sure it's still going to link to the actual file, the status, the priority, the workflow, and then close it all out. So when I come out, it shows exactly the same thing. However, when I look at this, and I look at this, they look very, very different. So you may ask, what is the point of doing this? Well, if I open up metadata menu, go into, let's say, the workflow, you can see there's this option here, set a command for this field. And if I turn this on, you can see icon list name. I'm just going to leave this as default, save. Now, while I'm working, I'm just going to get rid of this so you can see what's going on without it rendering. I'm going to add this line. And again, I'm going to reiterate, there is a template for this in the description, and this is in the help documentation. But what I'm doing is I'm creating a constant value, and I'm looking for the field modifier. And all of this is basically saying, look at the metadata menu API. Now, I'm going to come before the DV pages search and add await, which means wait. Promise all, which basically says await for all of these. And because I put a bracket in there, I'm going to put a bracket at the end. I'm going to add async next to the bracket between the P inside of the map. Now down at the workflow field, I'm going to add await F, so await for field, then DV, data view, P, still using the P for the map, and then workflow. Now it may not look like anything's changed, but when I go to workflow, there is a button next to it. And when I push the button, it takes me straight to that dropdown. So I click on write, it changes the information in the file, and now I essentially have a Dataview query that I can edit. And you see I can go up and down in a works on workflow, and it's not available in priority or status yet. So I'm going to go back into the icons, go to the status settings, add the command, and the list plus is the icon name, and I'm going to leave this to default. Priority settings, set command for field, leave it default. Now I need to add the waiting bit. So we now have the await command for status, await command for priority, and await command for workflow. So when I click out, you can see, again, it still looks like you would expect, but I can click on status, edit, work in progress, and then it may take a second or two because it's got to go to the file, and boop, it's changed it. Let's go status of project 2. Let's say this is done, and what it's going to do, again, it's going to go to the file, change it, and it's changing in both, but this is nice and simple and doesn't have API access. This is not so simple, but has API access, and it allows for editing. Now, of course, you can then come in, add filters, add sorts, add whatever you want to this, but now we have an editable Dataview query, which when I come back to my home canvas, you can see if I click in the card, hover over, I can still access that option to then change it. So we now have a Dataview, inline Dataview query with editable properties that can be shown inside of a canvas that can then be linked elsewhere. If you're interested to see how I put all of this together in my own vault, I have a video coming out next week, and maybe by the time you're watching this, it'll already be out, in which case I'll link it in the description below.